All right, here we go. Intentional coaching and your class program roadmap. My name is Amanda Joy. Thank you for coming along with me and improving your coaching. So what we're going to talk about here and get us started working towards is intentional coaching, which is coaching from a perspective of wanting your clients to actually learn something when they leave their class. We're going to talk about what that is and what that isn't. This first little portion of it, section 1, might be stuff you're already doing, but I want you to start thinking about how you're implementing it into your current class programming. All right. Intentional coaching is planning a class or content with a specific learning objective in mind and being able to communicate that to clients effectively. So it's not randomly selecting exercises from Instagram. It's not smoking your clients every single workout. And it's not just providing more education. We're not just throwing more spaghetti at the wall, hoping that something will stick. We're actually going to plan our classes in a way that we know will have them walk away learning something, or have them walk away knowing what your goal was for the workout. So instead of just planning the what of a workout, we're going to plan the why and the how to communicate that effectively. So you're going to plan a little bit more than just what you're working in class. The first thing I want you to start thinking about is, how do you start to plan a class? When I first started coaching routinely, I would very often head to Instagram. I followed hashtags like boot camp or group class fitness or Tabata workout. And I would kind of take some of the inspiration that I saw on Instagram and then build it into my own workout. Or I was part of these groups that had other group fitness coaches, and I would find something that they'd done and incorporate it into what I was doing. So I was pulling inspiration from other places, but I didn't really have a why. I wasn't really teaching my clients anything. I was just looking at hitting a stimulus, and that was that. So how do you start to plan a class is kind of the first thing that we want to start marinating on and thinking about. We're going to put a pin in that. We're going to talk about the 8 basic postpartum movement patterns. So you might see this listed as like the 5 basic movement patterns. There's some discrepancies or some conversation about what those exactly are. So I've kind of included a little bit more because I want you to be a better coach for your postpartum clients. And so that includes postpartum specific movement patterns that really benefit everyone, but really benefit the postpartum space. So these are applicable obviously everywhere, but specifically postpartum movement patterns that we should be working on. The first is the push. Push-ups or overhead press. It's pushing something away from your body or your body away from the ground or an object, kind of against gravity. The pull, any row variation, pull-ups, pulling your body towards something or an object towards your body. The squat, lower body push. It's also kind of thought of as the lower body push. You're pushing your body away with your lower half. All variations are included in this. Goblet sumo, front, back, squat, pistol, also the leg press if you're at the gym. The hinge is a lower body pull, a deadlift, any variety. Clean snatches and swings are generally put in this hinge category. Sometimes you'll see this as the 4 basic movement patterns, push, pull, squat, hinge. Then we kind of get into some of the other ones that athletic trainers and coaches like to include. Again, I'm over including because I think it's significant for postpartum fitness. Rotation and anti-rotation, I'm going to add to this list. So rotation is movements in the transverse plane. If you're familiar with the planes of movement, Russian twist, internal and external rotation. It can also be conducted overhead. So maybe a squat to an overhead press with rotation. If we have rotation, we also have anti-rotation, which is resisting that rotation. If you followed any of my content for any amount of time, you know that I love to offset your loads and single side your loads. And it's to hit this stimulus, which is that anti-rotation. So if you load up one side, you have to resist that rotational urge to dip. And I think it's so significant in life because life is an offset load. You're carrying a kid, you're carrying a bunch of groceries. Life is offset. Renegade rows or one-arm swings are also anti-rotational movements. Now we're getting into some movements that are kind of a combination, like renegade rows obviously also fall under a pull category, right? So then we start to get into some combination of movement patterns, but that's kind of that's what my goal is for you, is to start to recognize the movement patterns that are involved in a skill. So when you see a skill or a movement, you can break down the basic movement patterns that are necessary to perform that skill. You can identify the basic movement patterns to improve on that serve that skill. We also have carry on this list. Farmer carry, suitcase, overhead, racked. Carry is one of my favorite training inclusions as well. Sometimes you'll see the 5 basic movement patterns: push, pull, squat, hinge, carry. Again, I think that anti-rotation and rotation, and one more, impact absorption, specifically for postpartum, which is the eccentrically sustaining impact, jumping, running, single or double legged side, unilateral or bilateral. So this might be a little bit of an over list, but I want you to be able to recognize definitionally what basic movement patterns are involved in a skill. All right. There's your whole list. So, a roadmap: basic programming 101, how we want to start planning a class, compound movements. Compound movements are movements that recruit the most muscle and tax your nervous system the most. So they're more fatiguing, they are involved multiple joints, they usually carry a heavier load. So if you think about a squat versus a tricep kickback, those are going to be vastly different loads that you could carry, because the squat is a compound movement. It involves big muscle groups working together. Tricep kickback, not so much. We want to put those first higher up in the workout because they do tax the nervous system a little bit more. They are usually more difficult. They can usually carry more load. So we want to put them first. So focus on your compound movements up front. You can follow that up with accessory movements, which support our strength goals. They target supportive muscular systems, and they can be single-sided. So this is single-sided. You're obviously going to have to decrease your load, right? You can't carry the same load unilaterally that you would be able to bilaterally. So that becomes a supportive movement. You could follow that up with a higher rep burnout or a Metcon, which is metabolic conditioning, any kind of interval work at a prescribed work to rest ratio, which we're going to get into right now. Basic roadmap of programming: compound movements, accessory movements, higher rep burnout or Metcon. Bam, done. Let's talk about some of the words that you'll see and use in your programming, the lingo. AMRAP, as many rounds as possible in a certain time. So you as the coach are prescribing a set time. Your clients are filling that in with as many reps as they can, as many rounds as they can. So it might be more than just one exercise. This is specific, and I want you to stick with me, even this feels like something you're really familiar with. Tabata. Tabata was actually a researcher in Japan, and he did research specifically with this work to rest ratio: high intensity of 20 seconds and 10 seconds of full recovery, no movement, just recovery. That is a Tabata, as designed by his research and as he worked on. When we get into changing those numbers of work to rest ratio, we're going to call it something different. Also, if we're going to have a lower intensity, and then anywhere in there, we're going to call it something different, because that's not Tabata. Tabata is 20 high, 10 full rest. So if you're doing something like a plank during those 10 seconds, it's not a Tabata anymore. If you're doing something like a wall sit 20-10, that's not a high enough intensity to be categorized as that Tabata research. So Tabata is 20 seconds of high intensity, 10 seconds of full recovery. You can still manipulate those, but we're going to call it something else in a little you'll see in a little bit. ASAP, as slow as possible. Other people call it AFAP, as few as possible. I just prefer ASAP, as slow as possible. Similar to an AMRAP, you're just now working as slow as you possibly can. As the coach, you're prescribing an amount of time. Your clients are working as slowly as they can. Interval work. Here's where we kind of collect all that other work that has been referred to as Tabata work and call it interval work. So if you have something like a 30-second 10, or I'm just going to close this line. If you have something that's 45 seconds to 10 seconds of recovery, if you're doing something like 15 seconds of high intensity and then a 10-second plank, that's all great stuff, but it's not Tabata, it's interval work. EMOM, every minute on the minute. So this is, you might prescribe something like 2 burpees or run a distance, but every minute, every time that timer goes off, every minute on the minute, your class is doing something. Descending ladders, decreasing in reps or time, and then ascending ladders, increasing reps and time. And then obviously we have a combination, which is you might have an EMOM during a descending ladder, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so these are the basic programming and then some of the ways of putting those things together. This is what's coming up. So right now you're probably focused a lot on the series 1, 2, and 3, and that is the what of your workout. That is the actual movements that you're doing. That is the cool thing you saw on Instagram or somebody's lunge series that you really enjoyed doing, or you really felt differently the next day. That's going to be right here. Series 1, 2, and 3. And in my class planning, I have found that planning 3 chunks with an ample warm-up, explanation time in between, and an ample cool down comes out to about a 60-minute class. So those 3 series, something being like our compound movements, series 2, our accessory work, series 3, a Metcon, or some kind of interval training or some kind of burnout. So this, of course, this isn't hard and fast. You may have time for a 3rd series or a 4th series. You may have more time. Your warm up may be more of your series 1. This is a fluid thing, but just as a starting point, if we can start with those 3 blocks as our what, it'll give us kind of a framework to start with. So coming up in the next lecture, we're going to fill in the rest of this. So again, you're probably focused on the what, and you may be doing that already, and that's great. But now we're going to focus on the why and the how to communicate that effectively. And that's all part of your class plan. That's all part of coming up with a class. You might think about these things, but not actually integrate them into your class planning. So that's the dot that I want to connect for you. Taking your learning objective, creating the what, and then creating the how. So your learning objective, the why, actually becomes your seed, actually becomes your starting point. Then you create the what, and then you create the how you want to effectively communicate it. So that's all coming up. In the meantime, I just want you to think about how you normally start planning classes and what you write down. How does that come about? How do your classes begin to form? And then we're going to try to change it up with this roadmap and fill in some of these other boxes coming up. I can't wait.